With that inspiring introductory video setting the tone for the day, we now move to a very special moment in our program. It is our honor to invite our keynote speaker and esteemed chief guest, Ms. Gargi Rawat, to inaugurate the TEDx event with her address and formally begin today's celebration of ideas.
May we request Ms. Gargi Rawat to kindly come forward and deliver her keynote speech.
And thank you so much for that introduction. I am Gargi Rawat and I've been with the NDTV for over 25 years. I've been a journalist, I've been a news anchor, I've been a production assistant. In fact, the first time I came to Ahmedabad was after the Bhuj earthquake that took place and we were doing programming over here. So this sort of represents some of what I have managed and been lucky enough to do at NDTV. So from the beginning of my career till now, I have seen a dramatic change in the news landscape. From the way you are presented the news to the way that you consume the news. When I started as a young production assistant at NDTV, news was very curated, very responsible. We had just a few news channels. There was NDTV, there were a few others. Of course, you had Doordarshan. To today, and the sort of journey that it's been, a plethora of channels, hundreds of channels, different parts of the country, you have different channels, to the news actually being in your pockets, in your mobile phones. It went onto the internet, and then it went right there onto social media. It's on various social media sites. It's on WhatsApp. It's right there in your pocket, and the way we consume news has also changed. You are inundated with a lot of information every single day. So today, I'm going to talk to you about how you consume the news and how important it is to really think about it. You know the saying, look before you leap? So I'd like to say, think before you believe. Before you believe the news item that is coming to you. So first, let me talk a little bit about my journey. I joined the news, I joined journalism, not because I wanted to be a news anchor and read out the news to you on the television. It was because I wanted to tell meaningful stories, stories that would make a difference, stories that would bring about real change. And I was always very passionate about environment and wildlife, and I'm very lucky that I got to do a lot of that. We did various campaigns at NDTV. If you can see here, we did, Save the Tiger. It was one of our more popular and very, very interesting campaigns that we did. Amitabh Bachchan was our brand ambassador for that campaign. We did Greenathon, where we had a telethon where for 24 hours we would talk to you about the environment, about how you can make a difference, little things that you can do to change your carbon footprint, reduce your carbon footprint. And remember, I'm talking 25 years, so of course 20 years ago these ideas weren't as big as they are today. So I think I'd be happy to say that perhaps NDTV did spark a little of that change here in India. I also did documentaries on the Ganga. I traveled from Gangotri, where the Ganga begins, to Ganga Sagar in West Bengal, where the Ganga finally meets the sea. So I've been very lucky that I managed to do so many different things, but it's also been, as I said, a journey in seeing how the news landscape has rapidly changed, and news has started moving so much faster. Before you know it, you're getting news updates all the time, and very often reliability and truth has got left out somewhere in the middle as you consume that news. And very often the news that you receive is meant to instigate you. It's meant to make you feel very emotional. And when there's emotion, sometimes reason and logic just goes out of the window, and before you know it, you're very angry with that news you received, and then you send it on to somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else, and it just becomes a lot of fake news that is just being put out there. So this is what I want you all to really think about. The way you consume news, how each one of us has a responsibility on the type of news that we are sharing with other people. So definitely think, question what you are getting. Why is this news? Is there another perspective? Is this news told to me in any sort of biased manner? And maybe there is another part of this news that I don't know. And these are the questions, and that could be a superpower when it comes to critical thinking, especially in this day and age of too much information. So When we talk about information language, now I'm really looking forward to hearing all the other speakers today, but language really matters. Let me give you an example. 2 sentences, very different sentences. An angry mob gathered. Another sentence, protesters gathered. Now, can you see the difference that language makes? An angry mob gathers makes you feel it's something dangerous, it's something wrong, it's something illegal. Maybe who are these people? What is this angry mob? What do they want to do? When you say protesters gathered, they may be angry people, but when you say protesters gathered, it makes you feel, all right, they're people, maybe they're angry about something, maybe there's been some injustice done to them, they're protesting, they're demanding, maybe their rights are being, constrained in some manner, thwarted in some manner, and so protesters are gathering. Can you see the difference it makes, the language and how the news is presented? So this is what you all must really, think about when you get any news item. Perspective matters as well. For example, these days I find a lot of young people, especially, talk about our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. They have a lot of questions. They're all learning about economy, they're learning we're still developing economy, they're looking at other countries that are very developed, and then they like to have this opinion that Nehru did something wrong, we could have developed better, we could have been in a much better position today had Nehru and our leaders at the time of independence made certain decisions. Look at Singapore, it's such a small country, it's developed so fast. Now, this is why perspective matters and why reading and not just following what you get on WhatsApp matters. Because think about it. When Nehru and our leaders at that time, look at the country they inherited. Very, very poor, agrarian, very divided, very diverse. It was a huge challenge. So the British and many other countries thought we would fail. They didn't think we could pull it off. But here we are today. Nehru at that time and our other leaders, you had the example of socialism, communism, Russia. Then you had the example of capitalism, the United States, and everything in between. So they had to pick and choose and try to develop a country that could, meet the challenges ahead. We had to educate people. We had to set up factories and various companies as well and develop. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is something all of you must think about the next time you hear about how maybe our leaders in the initial years made mistakes. So you always have to have that perspective, which is why it's very, very important. Another, thing I hear these days, which I don't know if many of you have heard about it, but Mahatma Gandhi in Africa, they talk about how he was racist and how he was racist to the black people. Again, it's something you have to you're taking out of context. You have to think of back then when Mahatma Gandhi was in South Africa, the kind of challenges he saw, the kind of racism he saw, and then to be subjected to that same racism took him by surprise. And I'm sure it's something later on, because we're talking about the early years of Mahatma Gandhi, what happened later. Mahatma Gandhi also had a whole journey from when he was in South Africa to when he was in India, and all the ideas that he had. So again, it comes down to perspective and language. Now, one of the issues that Nehru dealt with at that time, and I find we're dealing with again, is this language imposition. If you've seen, there's this whole issue about imposing Hindi on the southern states, and there's anger over there as well. And I'd like to tell you a little story. My son, he's in college in the UK, and there are a group of them, and I know some of you are going to be going to college this year. So there were a group of Indians in the college there, and a lot of them were from Delhi, from North India, and they like to speak in Hindi sometimes to communicate. When you go abroad, it's a superpower to have a separate language. There's one student who's from Tamil Nadu, and he didn't like it. He said, I'm not going to speak in Hindi because, I will stand up against this Hindi imposition. Now the students were fine. They said, it's all right. You don't have to speak to us in Hindi. And gradually over time, even that particular student from Tamil Nadu, he also changed. He said he realized it's not an issue with their friends. Perspective changes. The fact that there was no sort of forcing of anything. So, and now they're all a jolly group of friends together. Another example, one story that I could tell you that we've all lived through, for example, has been our relationship with China. We saw what happened in 2020 when the Galwan clash took place. Chinese soldiers, Indian soldiers, they clashed in Ladakh. Unfortunately, there were deaths on both sides. It was of course, very shocking and very angering at the time. But then the news and politics and news, we made it into something huge. We, instead of taking a step back and talking about the issue, we made it into us versus them. A lot of China hatred started happening on our television channels and a lot of our media, and slowly we said, oh, and I wouldn't blame you for thinking we hate China, we don't like China, China's evil, they're against us, and various issues, and various steps were also taken in which we banned some Chinese apps, and we did many other things. There was an uncle, I remember seeing this video in which he threw his Chinese made television from the third floor of his apartment. That was the kind of anger there was, and media was also helping it along and promoting it. And we, over the years, then became closer to the United States. It seemed like a better bet for us at the time. To the second term of Donald Trump, when suddenly, again, things changed, tariffs, Trump, the United States didn't seem as friendly to us anymore. It seemed we were putting all our eggs in one basket. And then, once again, we have started getting friendlier with China now. If you've seen that, I hope you are following the news and you've seen that. Let me give an example that perhaps the kids will relate to better, or maybe it'll be more interesting for you rather than just talking about geopolitics. There's a movie starring Salman Khan. It's called The Battle of Galwan. Okay, they've been shooting it for the last 2 years, and it's about this clash that took place in Ladakh. And one can imagine with Salman Khan, it's going to be all about, how he's battling the Chinese soldiers and India and patriotism and how China is evil, or the Chinese soldiers are evil, except that now the situation has changed because we are no longer hating on China. We're now trying to become friends again. So the name of the movie has also changed. It has changed to Matrabhumi, May War Lie in Peace. So again, do you see how language matters, perspective matters, and I don't know what the poor filmmakers must be doing behind the scenes to re-edit that movie and make sure that it's more palatable and it's less, rah-rah and less hating on China, given our changed perspective right now. So this is just a few examples of how, the news you consume, the news you are being fed, that you can actually think about it a little more and, definitely form your own opinion. So don't always be reactive to the news that you receive. Always, think before you believe the news that you are receiving, and always try and be, a little more empathetic, a little more questioning. Always question about the news. What does it mean? Why are you receiving it? What is there another perspective, what it means for somebody else. And now you're going to be encountering the world of AI as well. So that's going to be a whole new challenge this generation, to us as well. The older generation too, I think, has learned to receive WhatsApps and start questioning them from blindly believing in them. And I think young people as well are going to be, that's going to be a whole new challenge of how you're consuming news and information that is coming to you in this world of, hyper information that you're receiving. As I said at the start, you're receiving news, constantly on your phones, and it's very important how you consume that news or the videos that you receive. So I think that is a little bit of what I just wanted to talk about also. And as you grow up, I think it's very important for all of us to have diversity in our friends, in our opinions, and so always try and maintain that, and always ensure that you don't, forward the news as received. Be a little responsible, be a little thoughtful, and in this world, again, with so many news channels, so much information, I'm also glad that today we can have this event without World War III taking place, and the fact that there has been a ceasefire, if you've been following what's been happening in Iran. So I think that's a very positive note, that I'm glad we're having this function today on a day when there has been a ceasefire, and there's hope that perhaps there will be some kind of a truce, some kind of an understanding. Big ideas. I really am looking forward to hearing all the other speakers later today. So that's, I think, all that I want to leave you with, this thought about how you consume the news, being responsible, and think before you believe every piece of news or every bit of information that you get. Thank you.